Hey y'all, it's Wendy from Village Card and Crafts. On a recent trip to the Magic Kingdom, I couldn't help but fall in love with the beautiful wreaths that line Main Street, USA. And I was super inspired to make my own wreath card. However, I don't have a wreath building template. So I got my noodle working and I created my own wreath builder template using a Cricut. And today I'm going to show you how to do that too. So stick around, because even if you don't have a Cricut, I have some ideas on how to make your own template. So hang with me to the end. And by the way, I just want to say a quick shout out to my beautiful granddaughter, Carter. Grandma loves you. And let's get crafting.
Once you've opened Design Space, click on New Projects and then choose Shapes and select the square. Next, change the width or the height to 4 inches. And I do change my color over to a different color so it's easier for me to see. Then I'm going to duplicate my image and I'm going to rotate it. I placed my bottom square image on the 1-inch line so that it went from 1 inch to 5 inch, and then I rotated my top image so that the edge rested on the number 3. That way it was halfway between. To ensure that my image is perfectly aligned, I click on the Align button and choose Center after selecting the entire image. Now it's perfectly in alignment. However, I'm going to just double check and also center it horizontally. Everything looks good. And now I am going to reselect my image and then click Weld. This will make those 2 images into one solid image. Next up, click Make It, and it's going to take you over to the screen where you can align that image exactly where you want it to cut on your mat. As you can see, I am playing with the placement on the mat of where I want that image. I want it to have about a good inch on all 4 sides when it cuts. That way I have a stable stencil to reuse. I'm using some acetate sheets that are 12 by 12 that I purchased from Amazon. However, if you don't have acetate, you can use heavy cardstock. You can have it cut down to any size you want. And while I'm saying this, you can also change the size of your template. It doesn't have to be 4 inches. It could be 6 inches. It could be 3.5 inches. It just depends on how big a wreath you want to create on cardstock. Now, my mats are well loved, so there's not a whole lot of stick left to them, so I do use painter's tape to hold down my acetate so it doesn't slide around while it's being cut. Back in Design Space, select Continue, and you're going to set your base material. I'm going to click on Browse All Materials, and in the search bar, I'm going to type acetate. Foil acetate is the result, and I'm going to select and click Done. You can choose whatever type of material you're using, be it heavy cardstock or standard cardstock. Following the instructions on the screen, we're going to load our material. So here I am loading my mat. And once it's loaded, I'm going to press the blinky button and it's going to begin cutting. Once your image has stopped cutting, I like to recut my acetate, so I do not touch those double arrows to unload. I simply hit the blinking Cricut button again and let it recut that image in the exact same spot that it was to start with. And that way I get a much more concise, crisp, clean image. Once I've unloaded my mat, I go ahead and take off my painter's tape and I flip my image over and I peel off the Cricut mat instead of peeling off the acetate. This way things stay flat and don't crinkle. As a bonus, you get a lovely little mask with this stencil as well. I cut my image down to 7 by 7 because that's the size that fits on my particular stamping platform. I use a Stamparatus from Stampin' Up, so you can cut yours down to any size you like. Because the acetate is clear, it's very difficult for me to see. So I flip over the mat in my stamping platform to the black side, kind of like a mouse pad, and I'm going to tape down my template to this particular pad. Because I cut my original square to 4 inches, that's the size paper cardstock that I'm going to use. So it is a 4 by 4 inch piece of heavyweight cardstock. I tend to like solid images on my wreaths, so I've selected a leaf image to start with, and I believe this is a discontinued set, but I'll take a look and see if it's still available. But you can select anything whatsoever that you have in your stamp stash. So by all means, experiment, see what you love. I'm going to start with this leaf image, and you do want to start with your cardstock in the square position rather than in the diamond position. If you start in the diamond position, your stamp will eventually end up outside of your cardstock, and you want everything to be on the cardstock so that it ends up in a continuous circle. I am using Memento's Cottage Ivy ink, I do believe, and I have lined it up on my square, and you'll see that I ink and stamp, and then I turn it one spot, and then I ink and stamp again, turn it one spot, and I continue until I make it all the way around my wreath. I'm going to line up a solid flower. Honestly, I don't remember what I selected here, but again, it doesn't matter. You can choose whatever you like for your specific wreath. I'm going to line it up by placing it exactly where I want it to fall on my template. For this next stamp, which is a solid floral stamp, I am starting with my cardstock in the diamond position. And the reason for that is I only want 4 flowers on this particular wreath. If I start with the square, it would go 8, and I just didn't want that many flowers. So watch where we're going with this one. I'm using Memento Dewdrops and Tangerine for my flowers. And as you can see, I kind of keep looking to see if I want it closer together, but I'm just going to go with the 2 spots on each of the diamonds there. And I end up with my 4 flowers to total out my wreath. I challenge you to use or look at your stamps in a different way. This little stamp is actually from a winter stamp set, and I'm sure I can link that below. It's teeny tiny, and I'm going to do this one in the cocoa brown color and fill in the blank spaces between the orange flowers. And again, I'm going to have to skip 2 spots to make it work. Now my wreath still didn't look finished, so I was looking for something else, and I found the perfect itty bitty little tiny stamp. It is just 3 dots. So I got this from the Botanical Rhapsody stamp set from May Made It. You could use a jelly pen if you wanted, or even a Crayola marker. I just happen to have the little stamp and thought I'd use it. So this time I'm doing it on the outside of my leaves, and I am going to make those 8 rotations all the way around, so no skipping around this time. I'm going to break in real quick and ask you to please like and subscribe. Remember, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe. And if you hit the notification bell, you'll be told anytime I make a new video. And it really does make a difference for the algorithm, and it will actually bring you more material that you enjoy. To complete the center of my wreath, I simply chose a circular die cut that fit in the middle. I cut that out of the same white cardstock, and then I went ahead and I used the Cottage Ivy ink to just kind of rough up the edges to kind of give it a little dimension. And then you're going to see that I chose a thank you sentiment from my stamp sets and stamped it in the middle. And then I popped it up on some foam tape. I'm using a 4.5-inch square green cardstock as my base, and I'm going to put my wreath down with some tape runner. And then, as stated earlier, I am going to go ahead and pop up my thank you sentiment right in the middle with some foam tape. You could choose to embellish your wreath even further. Some great options would be glossy accents, various shades of pops of color, sequins, any type of jewels. Lots and lots of different options. The sky's the limit, and just you're only limited by your imagination, so go for it. Send some pixie dust by giving me a thumbs up, subscribing, and ringing that notification bell. There are several options to make a DIY wreath builder. The Cricut isn't the only option. It just happens to be super easy because you can resize it very quickly. If you have nesting square dies similar to these are rectangles, so these won't work. But if you have squares, that would work. You would just have to make 2 cuts instead. The first cut you could make as your square in your manual die cutting machine, and the second you would just turn it on an angle. You could utilize your cutting mat as a way to line up so that you are perfect, have center alignment there, and then just tape it down and run it through your die cutter again. If you didn't have nesting square dies, could you still make it? Of course. You could cut out a square shape and trace it and cut it out with an X-Acto knife and do the exact same thing to line it up on a healing cutting mat or even your glass mat. So you do have options. So here's a look at my final card, which I did embellish with some small drops of glossy accents. I also made a second card that I cut out my wreath out of a circle die, and then I mounted it on a larger patterned paper circle, and then mounted that on my card base and embellished with a Mickey head and some pops of color and gems. Thanks for stopping by today. I'll see you real soon.